Hi, Rahim. Okay, let's start. So welcome so much to this meetup with Spacemaker. My name is Kristian. I work at Iterate, where I'm a CPO in residence. That means it's helping our venture portfolio with product management. We have as our main guest today, Carl, who's the CTO and co-founder of Spacemaker. If you want to say hi, Carl.
Hi.
And we have Kristi, who is a product lead at Vari, who's helping us moderate questions later on. Hi, Kristi.
Hey, everyone.
Great. So just in case you're new to this community, Produktleder.no is a community for product managers in Norway. Our goal is to just create networks and spaces where product managers and product leaders can share and learn from each other. So that we can help build the Norwegian community for product management. So we have a Slack community, we have meetups, as you can see, we have LinkedIn events, and sometime we are on Clubhouse. So if you're not a member yet, feel free to go to Produktleder.no and you can join there. You'll find all the relevant links. And the agenda for today, very quickly, is we'll start with 15 minutes of presentation from Carl. He'll share his story from startup to acquisition in 4 years. See if we can get him to do that in 15 minutes. We'll see if that's possible. And then we'll do like around half an hour of Q&A following that. So if you want to contribute, feel free to pose questions at any time during the event in the chat, and Kristi will help us sort through the questions and let me know what's relevant to bring up when. Also, feel free to just unmute and start a video and join in the conversation as you would in any other web meeting. We try to make these events informal and casual, so feel free to participate. And Jonas is taking me up on my word. I can see that's great. Hi, Jonas. Awesome. All right, so I'll get back to more details around how we do the Q&A section after the presentation. But first, let's give Carl time to give his intro. So that's over to you, Carl.
Okay, thank you. 15 minutes is a short time to tell a story, but I'll try. And I need to start, at least I think, by talking about what Spacemaker is and what problem we're solving. So hopefully you can see my screen. Just say so if you don't. Okay, so our vision is to design better cities with artificial intelligence. And the reason we want to do that is that there's a problem, a global problem of urban growth that most people can feel locally, in the sense that they all know, or most experience that their city is growing and their neighborhood is growing, and that there's some conflict in that areas are getting denser. But most people don't realize that this is a global trend, that all cities are growing, and that people are moving to the cities from everywhere from Oslo to Nairobi. And we're actually building a city the size of Paris within the cities that we have every week. So we're growing cities with the pace of one Paris each week, and that's continuously going on right now, and it will be going on for the foreseeable future. And there's a number of challenges to actually tackling this for planners and developers and architects. And it's become much more difficult than it was before. It has to do with the densification, but also the awareness that we need to have a sustainable environment, both for all inhabitants of the globe, but also for the people living in the cities. And that means that there's a huge number of competing requirements. And the construction industry and the real estate development industry has not been able to keep up at all. and it's not digitized. It's the least digitized industry in the world. It's even less digitized than agriculture. And that means that they have had negative productivity development since the 50s. So they're actually less productive now than in the 50s, which is terrible for this problem. So our approach is to attack the planning phase of this problem, where a lot of the potential is lost and a lot of the potential can be created by having creating better or making better decisions. And to do that, we're basically trying to reduce the cost of doing and the time spent of doing a design iteration to be able to take much more into account in each decision. And one way of putting it is that we're taking the whole industry from waterfall to iterative, which is a very disruptive shift. And one of the key elements to that is to do a lot of the heavy lifting for predicting the consequences of the changes and the alternatives on the development sites by analysis and insight, and also creating a collaborative environment around these problems where there's a lot of stakeholders, rather than all of these different stakeholders sitting in separate tools or with separate paper documents, basically. And an element of this is also what we call an AI on the shoulder, where predictive analysis and support in reducing these design iterations provides users with a help on the way, but with them in control, which is very important for creating value through applied AI, which is a topic in itself, and we might get into that in the questions afterwards. So just to kind of be specific about the value creation and the outcomes, this is a typical example of real estate development that has used Spacemaker. So they had an original solution, which they don't always have, but in this case, they've been working with architects and a team, I think, for almost a year in developing a solution. But they had problems with quality and also with profitability that made its site unfeasible to build. So after a couple of weeks of using Spacemaker, they were able to come up with a solution that looks kind of similar, but it's smart in many different places, just small tweaks everywhere, making it possible to increase the living area dramatically, but also increasing all of the qualities. So the outdoor qualities, which is super important for urban life, and the direct qualities of the apartments has increased. There's more light, there's less noise, there's more views. So this is a typical kind of outcome from using Spacemaker, where both the urban area around the site and the inhabitants in the site get a much better solution, while also actually having room for more apartments, which is important for cities that needs to solve their densification. So in a way, everybody wins, which is great. Okay, I wanted to show you a quick demo of how the product looks today. It's a cloud-based solution, and it has a lot of features. So this is just a glimpse, but this is, I think it's 1 minute. It has a little bit of a cheesy soundtrack. See if we can hear that. Okay, let's see. I'll stop sharing and just moving on to trying to kind of go into some elements from the journey, and at the same time trying to kind of touch on some different dimensions. So hopefully I'll be able to kind of create some context for you to kind of ask questions from, at least. I won't be able to go very deep into each topic, but starting with kind of the founding team and where we started, I think is interesting from a product management perspective. So we were 3 people starting the team. I have a kind of product background in both kind of being developing products myself and also building teams for doing that. And then there was Håvard, who was an architect, and he had the kind of experience the original pain that led us to start talking about this. And then Anders, which he's a management consultant with a business background. And between us, we had a multidisciplinary setup that I think was very powerful, at least for us, in building a company. And we started the company in 2016. And at that time, we were a couple of guys on a PowerPoint, but we also had a pretty clear idea about what we were going to do. And that's still what we're doing. Like, we wanted to build a completely new value chain that made it possible to work in a very different way and solve this problem and connect all of these stakeholders. So we were pretty clear about the kind of concept of what we were trying to build. And the way that we went to market, which is what we did first actually, is that we started talking to real estate developers and tried to sell them on being kind of pilot customers. We did not offer anything for free, because we believe that if you get it for free, it's very easy to be a free rider in terms of it's exciting to be a part of kind of digitization, and for a big incumbent to have a startup they're talking to. By paying a pretty high price point from day one, you get a much higher commitment and a much higher quality in the validation you're getting from the customer. And that was very important for us. So we signed up several customers that agreed to pay if we would solve their problem, basically. So no cure, no pay. And we were able to both hire a couple of people in the start of 2017, and then make some initial headway in demonstrating that our approach was feasible in that year, which also made it possible for us to raise more money. And then just kind of briefly touching on recruiting and building a team, which also is a talk in itself. But in the beginning of 2018, we were 10 people. And in the end of 2019, we were about 110 people. So we more than 10x in about 2 years. And we didn't use any recruiters for any part of the product team. And we even built a research office in Boston. We just flew over there and started talking to people on the campuses of MIT and Harvard, basically, which was a crazy time. But we can talk more about that if you have questions. But it's obviously a lot of effort, and a big part of the biggest achievement as a founder in building a company like this is to build and recruit an exceptional team, and to lay the foundations of a structure for them to succeed in delivering a product, and not, of course, in building a product ourselves. And going into just mentioning more about the organization, I'm a very strong believer in an agile mindset. And I consider myself a systems thinker. So I don't believe in organizational models and copying from others. I think all organizations needs to be alive and constantly evolving. But at the same time, I think organizational structures are extremely important. So key themes for me are servant leadership, psychological safety, transparency, alignment, and of course, autonomy. So with this in mind, it was clear to me, at least, that we never took in kind of, oh, we're a startup, so anything goes. We can just play it as we kind of move along. We thought from day one that we needed a strong and robust organization at all times, that we'd be able to support teams, to have enough alignment and structure to empower the teams to work autonomously at very high speed and quality, and moving in the right direction at all times, focusing on the lowest possible time to value for the user. And we say that we're organized for time to value, basically. So the goal at all times has been for each team to be relatively stable, while the structure supporting the teams changing all the time to support more and more teams and more complexity. And we've changed and learned and iterated the organization almost every day through the growth, and treating it more as a continuous stream of experiments, basically like everything else we do. And just talking a little bit more about product management and how we think about that. I strongly believe that great products are created in multidisciplinary teams, with all the core disciplines having ownership and accountability. So specifically, we need 3 core functions: product management, engineering, and design, to work together to shape great outcomes. And that's why our team is organized in these 3 functional areas, where we have a head of product management, a head of engineering, and a head of design to support the teams. And teams do not have one team lead. They instead have a trio of a product lead, a tech lead, and a design lead. And together, they ensure that the team discovers, develop, and deliver great value to users. And the whole team is accountable for those outcomes, but the leads are responsible for alignment and maintaining the balance between the functional areas. And I strongly believe that a whole team needs to be motivated by creating products that customers love, much more than the craftsmanship of their discipline. So not kind of creating great code, but creating great value. And that's why I sometimes say that product management is for everyone. We've also recruited for this, so that the motivation of the people working in the team is very much focused on user value and creating great products. And this has been particularly, at least we think it's been very important and very challenging for the type of product we're building, because it's so technical. We've had to invent a lot of things. And this means that the feasibility risk has been incredibly high. And that makes it very tempting to become kind of technology driven and kind of focus on the tech. But I also believe that it generalizes to more products than ours, that in such situations, the usability and feasibility risk is often equally high. And also adding to that, since our aim has been to create a whole new kind of iterative way of working, bringing agile to construction, if you will, it's been very hard to just ask users, or even using mockups to get good feedback. And that means that for both the kind of usability problems and the technical problems, we've basically approached all of it with the same conceptual approach. So we haven't had any dedicated research teams and no kind of AI research unit or anything like that. We don't want handovers. So we have product teams that just constantly juggle delivery and discovery with different time spans and different iteration loops. So sometimes, of course, we break out kind of short-lived task forces when necessary, but always kind of landing back within the ownership of a product team. And I guess that might sound obvious to some, but for us at least, it's required a lot of discipline and continuous improvement to actually make that work. And of course, we're still learning. And from what I've learned from many other AI startups that I've kind of encountered over the years, this is something that a lot of companies with that kind of technical component kind of struggle with. And I believe humbly that working so hard on that has been a key kind of success factor for us. And I see that I need to kind of speed up a little bit. So I just wanted to mention also kind of as something you might want to ask about, the rationale for selling the company and the kind of product perspective to that. We founded the company in 2016. So fast forward to 2020, so last year, we'd expanded to all the Nordic countries in France and having a great deal of success. But we also saw that a pure product-led growth would take decades in this industry, especially for our kind of core working tool product. And we were actually preparing ourselves to build a sales team of thousands of people and to raise a big Series B round to really enable that. That was the strategy. But then about the same time, Autodesk knocked on our door. And not only do they have a huge sales machine, and they have customer relationships with millions of our core target audience. So they actually had a vision that was perfectly aligned with ours, while they did not have a product that delivered to the same value proposition. And that meant that it was a really good fit. And the more we got to know them, over Zoom, obviously, the more impressed we became of the company. And it really is an awesome company with an amazing culture, and it's very compatible with ours. So we saw that we could merge with them and dramatically accelerate the path to global impact, which is what we want to do. We want to change the way we design cities all over the world. Well, we could also keep the product identity and the team here in Oslo. So that's why we figured that was just a perfect opportunity. So long story short, we sold the company before Christmas, and which is about 4 years after we made the first PowerPoint, which feels in a way too short. But now we're an Autodesk company, we're just still the same team with the same mission, working to help the world design better cities. So it's feels like just a very exciting milestone towards the bigger picture. So we're still building. Hopefully that was a little bit structured. I was trying to kind of go through some kind of very different themes here, while also going through the chronological story. So hopefully that was not too incoherent. But I think I'll stop there and take questions.
Yeah. Very good, Carl. Excellent. So I'll kick things off with a question, but feel free to join in either by posting in the chat or just unmuting yourself and activating video, and then you'll pop up here and join the conversation. Just to kick things off, Carl, so I'm really curious about this journey. You said you had a clear concept in the beginning. But I'm curious, what aha moments did you have during the way where the product changed, or actually you found out that you were right during?
Yeah. So one thing I think I should mention is that I generally, like, when people ask me if we had any failures, I'm not. It's just my kind of, I guess, mindset that I don't think of things as failures. I just think that we're just learning all the time, and at least that's a convenient way to kind of not dwell too much, but just try to learn. So we've failed with a lot of things, right? And just try to change and make things better all the time, and that's the same with organization and product. But some of the kind of big realizations with the product. And the thing that I talk the most about with other AI companies is the AI on the shoulder versus the black box AI. And this might seem obvious to some, but the thing is that AI doing magic is what I call the black box AI. So you kind of want the AI. It's really fascinating if you can just make the AI can just conjure up something, and it's wow, the AI just did this. This is so cool, and that creates a strong. That's very kind of easy to buy because it's fascinating. It's magic. You want to buy that, but using it is very hard, because if you're actually a practitioner that has to make decisions, putting that into your workflow kind of just messes up your workflow completely, because you don't know how it made the decisions. So if the decisions are too big, or the leaps are too big, it just becomes it just falls off. You can't use it. So we had an intuition about that, but we still kind of, in the beginning, like we had to sell the product before it was used, right? And as I mentioned, it's kind of an enterprise situation where people are using it in big projects, so it can't be kind of completely product led, and it's introduced into a full team. So the buyers really wanted the shiny AI, right? So it wasn't like a fully black box thing, but it was still not iterative enough. So we had a lot of people buying it, and they were super excited. Even the users were super excited, but then they weren't kind of, it wasn't increasing in usage. It wasn't repeatable success at all. And this was, I think it was in 2018. Sometimes I kind of mess up the timeline because it's so compressed. So many things are happening, but we kind of realized that we need to really not scrap everything, but really build out the features supporting the iterative elements to really support the user in interacting with the support that we're given. So that what we built. So we kind of figured that out in the winter, and the kind of team really absorbed that, and then they kind of built out the product in many different directions at once over kind of 3 months, and then launching what we call the Gen 2 product that was much more iterative, which was really kind of the foundations for the next stage of success. Even though it's of course evolved a lot after that, that was a kind of a directional shift.
So few people coming in. Kristi, feel free to moderate, or anyone.
Yes, we are getting questions first and foremost on team. So one of the first questions we got is from name John. I don't know how to pronounce the name, but asking, the first 10 people in a startup are vital to hire, right? What is your advice in hiring exceptional developers for the SaaS startup that just started with no name yet? How do you make a talent want to work with you? And feel free to elaborate on this name if you want to turn on your video or microphone.
Oh, thanks for reading the question. Well, the question says it all. So.
Okay, so I'll just try to answer it then. There are some different elements, I guess. So first of all, I think one thing that we focused very much on is that we want exceptional people, but we want exceptional people that likes to work with other people. So not kind of singular 10xers, but people that are really excited that people can be smarter than them as well. So that's not necessarily exactly what you asked for. So what I generally have figured out that I think has been an important success factor for us is that we developed a clear vision that was very ambitious about creating impact, but then we were able to communicate that vision in a way that it felt convincing and understandable how we would kind of get there, and also how the person we talked to would be able to play a part, because everyone wants to be important where they are. So even though our ambition was and is to change the way cities are built in all cities of the world, but every kind of project development and every site that's developed in Oslo or everywhere else will kind of be there for the next 50 years. So every single project that we make better is kind of making it better. And this was very, very important to us, and creating that kind of really, really selling narrative, and for us founders to be very present in all of the recruiting situations. So we did all the final interviews for every role, but we also were in a lot of the startup or the initial calls. So some people have said to me that we were lucky because we have kind of a sustainability, the problem we have is very attractive, and I think that's right. But I also think that every startup can create a story around impact. They should be able to create a story around how they improve something. It doesn't have to be kind of changing a city. Creating a better workflow for people that they like is also valuable, and I think you can create that around everything. And as a founder, you should be able to tell a exciting story and get yourself excited about what you're building, right? So I think that's important. And then on the network part, one other thing we did was that we didn't say oh, do you know anyone that want to work for us? We generally said to people in our network that, are there anyone that should be kind of given the opportunity to hear about us? So because people generally filter out everyone that they kind of, oh, he's happy in his job, so I won't bother him by kind of giving that number to this other guy. That would be kind of rude. But if you turn it around, that this person will find this problem exciting, and it's not they don't have to. Nobody said that they're open for business or want to change their job. It's just that they might find this problem or the thing we're doing interesting, so they should have a coffee, right? Just to kind of lower the bar for getting people in the door, and then kind of selling hard on the vision. So that's at least how we did it.
Thank you.
That was very interesting. And then GS is asking more a bit about the team. So what was the average team size, how they were organized, and how autonomous were they? And GS, feel free to expand if you want, but you can also just remain silent.
Okay, I'll just start answering, and then you can fill in the question then. So as I said, this has been a continuous kind of development, I would say. So in the beginning, team sizes were pretty small, and that was because we needed to change a lot and we needed to do many things in parallel. So like the rate of change and the rate of kind of reconfiguration of teams was very, very high, and it had to be because we were experimenting in so many different directions. But I've built many teams before, and I know that teams over time need a level of stability and a level of kind of but also kind of some rate of change, right? So it's good if they have some kind of rate of change, but there's still, like, in the start they were organized just around problems, but now the teams are more stable and kind of can also be kind of they can get a new mission rather than kind of changing the whole team. But we still actually reconfigure and change teams based on product needs. So that's something we still do. But on the so now, kind of for more stable teams, I tend to, like, in the beginning, like 5 or 6 people was fine. Now I tend to favor 8 to 10, and sometimes even more, because of the need of having a fully kind of cross-functionally capable team, so that everyone is actually fully capable in the team. And then rather allowing the team to be flexible in how they internally organize, and sometimes they create kind of mini teams around their problems, which is fine. And we also have what we call mission blocks, which is groups of about 3 teams that are kind of functionally or user value aligned. So they have more interaction than they have with other teams, just to make it easier for them to have an alignment kind of path. So in terms of autonomy, I often kind of think that the word like autonomy alone creates confusion, because I think aligned autonomy is a much better expression, because I don't think anyone is really like being completely autonomous in the sense of being dropped in a field and just run wherever you want to go is not creating the right structure for people to feel confident and safe that they're creating value and running in the right direction. So we've always focused on creating a strong context. So this is the direction and the problem we like, the higher level problem we need to solve, and then giving the team 100% autonomy in terms of how they define their goals within that, and also how they reach those goals. So the autonomy is strong, but the alignment is very important to empower them to actually feel confident and empowered within that alignment, if that makes sense.
Look, can I just jump in and ask a question here? Thanks for the thanks for the presentation, Carl. Really interesting case. I was wondering, you talked about you had a PowerPoint to begin with, and you started like trying to sell on the PowerPoint. When did you first land your first sales, your first 1, 2, 3 sales? And when did you, going from those sales, when did you know that they were happy with the product and that you made actually something they wanted? And if you could describe your path to product market fit, how you kind of pushed that way and what you focused on to get there, that would be amazing.
That's a big question. So trying to kind of just take the first part of it. So we were kind of promising the impossible to this industry, because like this is a pain that's so kind of fundamental that nobody's thinking that it can be solved. They're just kind of, oh, it's hard. We'll work on, like, we'll use paper and pen, and it's just it's hard to do our job. They're not even looking for solutions because it's too big for them, because you have to solve so many things. You have to create a complete value chain, and it's just a huge thing. So we had to kind of focus on a core value proposition within that, and that was to like that we can create some proposals, some alternative like site development options that solves the needs or the outcomes that you're looking for in a site better than what they had. So which is just kind of really, really focusing it down, and not saying that, like, we said all the time that it would, like, they were buying a product, but it basically was a service, right? We did it for them. And then we delivered it through a web interface that we demoed for them, so that we tried to kind of just anchor that we're not consultants. We're going to sell you a product, right? But it's just not completely self-serviced yet. And that, I think that's important, just to create that narrative. And then what we did was we said, like, would you give us, like, if we were able to create a better, like, alternative for this site, that if you think it's better, you need to pay us $500,000 or something to that tune, right? Because this, like the cost of having like bad decisions in this industry is very high, and of course that's not a sustainable kind of product. Like there's no kind of go-to-market product packaging pricing in that. It's just that trying to validate. If somebody pays you that means that it has created value, right? So we just went on with that. But we like about the same time as we were able to hire 2 data scientists. That was the first thing we did. So no kind of product team, just 2 data scientists and me, basically, just hacking on and creating a web interface for demonstrating the solutions, and then just trying to like throw algorithms at the problem, trying to figure out how to do this analytically better than the manual process. And then that we did that kind of through like from the winter of 2017, and then we kind of demoed and sold, if you will, the solution to 3 different real estate developers in the summer of 2017, and that was enough for investors to trust the product enough to want to fund it. And that was crucially important in terms of funding. And it was only then that we were kind of really started developing it as a product. So we hired a head of design and software engineers, etc., and started to build product teams, and accelerated that kind of from the fall of 2017 and through the winter of 2018, basically. But in terms of product market fit, it's just been a continuous, very, 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 very experimentative journey, because it's completely unclear what the product really needs to be, what good looks like, basically, because nobody's ever used a web-based tool, and nobody's used a tool where they're collaborating. They're sitting kind of in their own computers. So what the key value creation we're actually providing is actually to a group, because there are several stakeholders like working together. So that's also been really hard in terms of measuring kind of product market fit, and also for which is usually kind of user based, right? So or you're kind of measuring, for example, like what it would, how disappointed you would be if you lose this product. So it's more complicated, but it's just been, I guess, the simple and hard answer is just that we've been focusing really, really hard on kind of getting that user feedback and that value creation, and then experimenting towards that, but with having a pretty kind of strong conviction that we need to create, it needs to be a web-based product. It needs to drive collaboration between the users. It needs to be transparent. It needs to have analysis to provide to drive down the cost of the iterations, to make it easier for people to iterate, and kind of believing in those concepts, which is, I think, is very interesting in terms of this lean perspectives of product management as well, because you like not being able to ask the users is something that kind of to many people might feel wrong, right? That you can't really ask them what they need. Because the loop from what they need to what they're asking for is huge, and that's been a continuous problem for us, and kind of also many times kind of doubting if you're on the right path, because it's so hard to validate. But just having an amazing amount of experiments, and trying to set up the teams so that they can independently experiment very, very hard within their part of the product. And that's also how we set up. That's going into the technical part, but it's of course a SaaS product, but it's also very kind of built through very kind of last generation kind of serverless technology, so that there's no kind of ops and no kind of shared responsibilities. All teams can kind of work very independently in the things that they're delivering, so that, and there's no test environment or anything. Everything's production, but it's just feature toggling, so that there's kind of a huge number of experiments going on at every. So that's I think been necessary for us to be able to iterate and just trying to move towards product market fit. Maybe not a clear answer, but just at least attempting to.
It's really interesting, Carl. Let's bring Thomas in. He works at Berge.
Yeah. It's essentially a follow-up on this exact question, where it's a sort of the productification of AI. And I really loved your story of the AI black box versus the AI on the shoulder. And then just trying to paraphrase you a bit then, in terms of, after the fact, once, the numbers you showed in terms of time efficiency, cost efficiency, money saved, after the fact, that's quite easy to observe, right, once you have it in place. But I guess the question is, how did you sell that in the first place before you actually know what those are, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think you touched upon it, but it's sort of the outcome-based definition of, for the user. Is that okay?
Yeah. It's very perceptive. So that's basically very difficult and almost impossible. So in terms of when you do single projects that we did in the beginning, we could just use a no cure, no pay kind of way of approaching it, and then selling on those other examples, right? So others have achieved this, but I think from a product, when you create a product, it's very easy to kind of put when you are doing impact mapping, which is what you would kind of call this. We of course said, okay, this is because they use Spacemaker, right? But if you use PowerPoint for creating a presentation and everyone loves your presentation, and then Microsoft suddenly calls you up and say you should pay us like $10,000 for PowerPoint because we heard that you had a great presentation yesterday, and you're like, okay, I did that, right? The tool has just made it simpler, but that was me. And that it's the same type of dynamic with a project team that's they're professionals, right? They've had long experience and they're working to create a great development, and of course they believe that they were the ones doing that. This is just an enabling tool. So it's actually dangerous to go too hard into kind of promising that your tool is responsible for outcomes. And so we don't generally do that, right? We want to empower teams, and we sell on that they will be able to do these things, not that they will be able to get exact numbers, because that's never possible to really affirm. But we just try to work really hard on getting existing customers to kind of publicly state that we would never be able to do this without Spacemaker. A very early quote from Obos was that they saved a full year on a development, right, where they usually would use 4 years, now they use 3, and just in capital expenditures, that's like 50 million, even if the project's not better, right? So it's just that's huge impact. So that's a way of just validating that the product can deliver, but pricing that is that's very, very hard, and it's something that I think that's something that many stumble with, and we also did in the beginning because we thought that we would probably be able to do that, right? But that's not something we're doing. But we're still able to capture kind of a lot of value through have a high price point because the value creation is there. But it's still not, you can't really take a cut of something that you can never create an alternative reality where you actually know what the benchmark is. So yeah. And yeah, you get the point.
Definitely. So, thanks.
Thomas works at Berge, who's just to say a few words because it's relevant. It's quite deep tech also, Thomas.
Yeah, so we use AI to find all ships on our oceans, including those that are turning their trackers off. And sometimes for us, it's hard to measure exactly how many ships are those and what's the value of finding those locations and where they're headed and so on. Especially when the AI isn't fully built yet. And so after the fact, we can measure it, but how do you sort of match that to the value of the customers you're targeting?
I think it's very hard in every domain that you kind of introduce something like this, but at least we figured that kind of it is valuable to do those kind of validations, right? It's because it gives credibility, and you should definitely do that. And customer stories is always kind of the best, right? If someone can say that they found value, is much more credible. But pricing that is that's difficult.
So how did you experiment on the pricing in the early stages? Was it just finger in the air and you try to
It's
go
the
from
old
there?
start high and then just go lower, which is just sounds dumb, right? But it's the best you have, because you're not really, nobody really knows, right? It's not efficiency, right? Isn't really priced on anything, because this phase is not the most time intensive. It's not the most expensive. They don't like in the construction phase, which is later stage. That's where they spend the most money. It's the most capital intensive. But this is the stage where you set that up for success, right? So you can save a lot of money downstream, but you can't really measure that. So it's just but the developers and the architects, they of course they see that there's a lot of value in this, right? So you just have to kind of try to figure out some way of doing it. And we've been experimenting with a lot of ways, but of course now we're moving towards more scale. And also that's another kind of part of kind of financing and funding, where having a partner like Autodesk makes it easier for us to take a lot more pricing risk, like price model and go to market risk, in terms of standardizing and probably having a lower price point, or at least a more differentiated price point. That's just lower customer acquisition and easier for customers to acquire, without risking kind of taking the bottom out of the addressable market that we're working with.
Great. Let's check in with Kristian. Do you have any questions coming in?
Actually, I have a question myself. I was wondering, do you see that you're a Norwegian company by, like, you were born here? Do you see that this same timeline could have happened if this is not a Scandinavian or Nordic company? Or is there any, like, do you think it's a factor in your success?
I think it's a very hard question. Like or not a hard question, but I guess it's hard to answer, because you would think that it's difficult to start a company like what we did in Norway in a way, because it's a very small market. It's also small in terms of getting talent. So we started here because we came from here, right? But there are some elements to the digital adoption and the digital readiness in the Nordics that I think is beneficial for the problem that we started solving. But I actually I was surprised by our ability to actually attract talent, because we attracted a lot of really, really, really amazing people that I'm very proud that wanted to work with us. But that's that we were able to recruit so many is in Norway I think that might have been easier many other places. But I guess this is very biased, but I do believe that it's a little bit easier to set up a kind of high trust, high autonomy type of organization in the Scandinavian culture. But it's definitely possible in many other places, and many other companies have succeeded with that in other places. So just keeping that very humble. But that might, like, in terms of kind of inventing something, which is what we've done in many areas, that might have been kind of beneficial. But at the same time, we went to Boston, right, and we were able to attract great talent there, and I believe that they're very much able to work in the same way. So it's not unique to Norwegians at all. So that's not I've thought a lot about this, and I don't have a clear answer. It's just there are positives and negatives for starting a company in Norway, I guess.
Oh, sorry. And in terms of getting your first customers, because you mentioned high trust, and I think that's one of the keys that you mentioned: high risk, high return, and you asked for companies eventually to trust you based on PowerPoint presentations, for that matter.
That's a good point. I think that's something that's easier in Norway, and we specifically, just to mention that as well, we specifically targeted real estate developers with young leadership teams actually in the start, because we figured they would be more kind of open, which they were. But I also actually believe, which is also very kind of unbiased, or sorry, very biased, that we were all 35 when we started the company, and it's a little bit easier to get trust in kind of a management of a company when a person comes in that has worked some time in the industry, and also the team that's building it seems like not kind of directly out of school. So I think that in that sense that was helpful. But of course I don't know if that was helpful. It's just something I think. So it might have gone just as well with someone that was 20.
Thanks for that. We have one question that is, I think it's more on the personal side. GS is wondering if you have any thought leaders or role models, let it be in product development, that is inspiring you or you're following.
So when we started Spacemaker, I felt that I didn't really see or have any kind of really kind of network or input that of what was out there. I'd built kind of my own ideas from 10 years of I was responsible for kind of product, how we built products and how we built product teams in the Beck Consulting. I was in the technical leadership team there, and I also had built like single teams and teams of teams and for customers for a while, and I had a lot of kind of strong ideas about how that should work, and this agile mindset is a very kind of central part of that to me. But sometime into like I think last year, or at the beginning of 2020 actually, or end of 2019, I read Inspired by Marty Kagan, which just surprised me that I kind of hadn't kind of caught because that book has been around for a long time. So that actually really connected really, really well with how we were doing things, and because we were already, they kind of championed the design engineering product setup that we already had. So it was really, really close to what I believe in, and so I started using that as part of the training internally for product managers. And now I kind of, I don't think I've ever read anything from Marty Kagan that I disagree with. So at least fundamentally. So that's kind of the strongest inspiration I have from product management.
If I could just add to that, I noticed you mentioned a few times like feasibility risk versus value risk versus usability risk, etc. Mm-hmm. And that I think comes from Marty Kagan.
I started using. Sorry.
So how do you make sure the teams actually use that to mitigate the risk in product discovery?
Yeah, so before I found those kind of all that material, it was very hard because you had to kind of build everything myself in terms of training, and that's like looking back, I'm kicking myself because I didn't really look far enough, because I guess I read some product management material that was not what I was looking for, and I was kind of felt that I didn't really find the right stuff out there, and I didn't want to give people the wrong, like feed people with the wrong ideas. But so that's been very helpful in using those, like just using those terms. But making sure is just asking kind of questions, I guess, like around and expecting the teams as they are. When you're autonomous, you're also accountable. So you need to show that you're actually working to reduce risk, and that you're looking at opportunities, and that you're evaluating them, and that you're either taking a new path because you believe in it, or discarding it because you've actually tested it. So I think that's actually the kind of, it regulates itself if you kind of set the right expectations for what team needs to work on to show that. But it's a continuous, like these are all of these things in organizations, like delivery and discovery, they're kind of contradictory, right? You're working for time to value, and you're working to prioritize what you need to build now. So this will, like, if you just leave them and not kind of continuously work with them and discuss, they will kind of either one will take over, or it will kind of stop working, because it just has to be kept alive. So you have to just keep discussing it and working with the teams on their methodology and how they're working. So that's, I guess, to me, that's the kind of simple and hard answer, that we don't believe in very hard, like strict frameworks, but rather kind of continuously working on these things as a culture.
And so building that culture from 10 people to 110 people in 2 years, I guess, has to be a challenge. How do you copy paste the culture like that?
It's a lot of work, and I guess being very present and just continuously discussing and communicating the intent, so that people can kind of internalize and understand, and not telling them what to do, but telling them, explaining and discussing why we're doing things and what we're trying to achieve, so that they can internalize that and make that their own, and then they can run with that. So that's the autonomy part is super important, but it has to be around what you're trying to achieve, and that's the alignment part. So the alignment needs to, the levels of alignment needs to increase over time. You need to create more and more layers of alignment. You could also call that context, right? You need to understand the context you're working within. But as long as you have that and you kind of understand what you're accountable for, I think it's amazing to see what people can kind of figure out on their own and how that can scale. So I think that's also kind of a secret to Agile, is that it's incredibly scalable, because if people have a team and they work within that as a kind of node in a network, you don't have to it doesn't necessarily become harder when you have more of them. So when you put one person into a team and they're new, they don't have to understand everything. They can just work within that team, and then they can expand their kind of sphere of understanding over time. So that's also crucial to being able to scale that fast over time, is that you're scaling you're not kind of reconfiguring the whole network and having to learn everyone has to relearn everything. You're kind of just adding layers, and everyone knows how a team should work, right? So just adding a new team, that's just like splitting it in two, and you have kind of cross-pollination from the teams you have, the existing teams. But then when you add more structure, you need to explain that really, really well and do a lot of change management. I believe in the target operating model. I'm not sure if that's a term, but I don't remember what team I heard using that term, but it's just kind of showing everyone where we're going without saying kind of that we're like, this is like, we're changing this now. You're rather saying that this is where we want to go. We're not there right now, so everyone understands where we want to go, and everyone can give their input and discuss it. And basically, if everyone that kind of think it's a good idea, you can kind of just move there right at once, right? But it's much easier for people to accept than saying like, oh, we're changing the structure. Then that's kind of gets people kind of really scared, or kind of just threatens them. But if you explain that we want to move this in this direction, they listen, and they're able to kind of interact with it, and then you can change. So that's just a kind of small tool in that. But when you change a lot, you need to do that kind of very consciously, so that people don't feel that everything's just kind of moving unpredictably around them.
That's great. I see we're out of time actually already. Time flies when you're having interesting conversations, probably. So if there are any additional questions, I think we have to just move them online. And just to repeat what I said in the beginning, is that anyone is very welcome to join Produktleder.no, which is our community for product leaders in Norway. And if there's any additional questions that we didn't have time for now, maybe we can talk Collin into just sharing a few words on text with that later on. But we'll see.
Sure.
Are we gonna see Carl in our Slack channel?
Sorry?
Are we gonna see Carl in Slack?
We have to ask Carl about that, maybe.
I basically live on Slack, so
Yeah.
I'm happy to find another channel.
Yeah, putting you on the spot there, but
yeah, sure.
Yeah. So anyone, feel free to join Produktleder.no. You'll find all the relevant links there. And Just to mention also our next event. Our next event is with Leo, who works at Google, is a product lead at Google. So he'll be sharing how Google does product management, basically. So that's going to be next week, and you'll find the links for that as well on Produktleder.no. That's it, I think. Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you so much for your time. Have a great day.
Bye.